Good afternoon, Purple family. Welcome to another episode of Shades of Purple, a Prince podcast. On this episode, I'm going to be reviewing Prince's 7th studio album, Around the World in a Day. But before I get into that, my last episode, I talked about Prince's philanthropy, and I forgot to mention some of the organizations that he donated to during his lifetime. And I'm assuming that the Prince estate is probably still donating to some of these foundations, but I just wanted to list them because I told Shannon that I would. So some of the charitable organizations that Prince gave to during his lifetime were City of Hope, Edith Covey Memorial Scholarship, Elevate Hope Foundation, Elton John's AIDS Foundation, and that was the one that I couldn't think of during the last episode. I knew it was the AIDS Foundation, but I wasn't sure which one, but it was Elton John's AIDS Foundation, and he would go to their annual event. Matter of fact, if y'all remember that red and black suit that he had when his hair was really short during the musicology era, and I think this is when he was still married to Manuela, when they went together, I think she had like a black dress or anything. Something like that. Anyway, that was for Elton John's AIDS Foundation. So I'm sorry, I knew that was random, but it just popped into my mind, so I had to say it. So also the Goss Michael Foundation, Helping and Loving Orphans, also known as HALO, Jazz Foundation of America, PETA, of course, the Bridge for Youth and Urban Farming. So that was just a small list of some of the charitable organizations that Prince gave to during his lifetime. So of course, there are probably numerous other ones that we'll never know about that he just privately and anonymously gave to, because he just had such a huge heart and a huge heart for service and children and families and things like that. Because, Prince didn't come, I wouldn't say that he came from a broken home necessarily, but he did have a hard childhood, and so I know that he's, sympathized with other people that, especially children, children of single parents or broken homes and things like that. Because, his childhood wasn't, it wasn't idyllic, we'll say that. So moving on. So Around the World in a Day. So now we're up to, and I would consider Around the World in a Day almost another, like, how would I say it? Like another not a breaking point, but turning point. There we go. Turning point in Prince's career. And the reason why I say that is because Around the World in a Day, just like how Dirty Mind was very personal for Prince, Around the World in a Day was also another album which was very personal for him. And the reason why I say that is because after going to the mountaintop of Purple Rain, he wanted to, as he told his manager at the time, he now wanted to go climb the ladder or look for the ladder, because he realized that, the success of Purple Rain, he would say later on in the song, My Name is Prince, just going to the top is just a dream. And it's lonely at the top. Let's be honest, So he kind of, got that high of being on top of the world and being number one all over the world. And I mean, it was a good feeling, but at the end, I think it left him kind of empty, because he will remark later on during the Purple Rain tour that, people were just going, he felt like a lot of people were just going because of the movie, and they would cheer, at the times where they thought they were supposed to cheer. Because the way the Purple Rain tour was set up, and I didn't really talk about this when I did my review, but the way the tour was set up is a lot of the songs, and I mean, they played all the songs, of course, but they kind of set it up almost like they did for the movie. So they played it, like even down to Prince kissing Wendy during Purple Rain. Like, they did a lot of the tour stops just like the Purple Rain movie, because they knew, Prince's management team knew that's what people were expecting. They were expecting pretty much the Purple Rain movie on tour. And I think that whole concept really bothered Prince after a while. He understood, the reasoning behind it. to kind of push the album and, to push the movie, which were both very successful. But, Warner Brothers knew that they had to keep that momentum going. And so the tour had to be, bigger than life, which it was. But for Prince, I think it was just kind of a moment where he was just like, okay, this is great. But honestly, by the time the Purple Rain tour got started, he was already 2 albums down the road, y'all. He was already working on Parade. He was done with Around the World in a Day, which came out in April of 1985. So toward the end, well, that was the end, because the tour ended April 7th of 1985. And so the album came out just a few weeks after the tour ended. So literally, while they were doing the Purple Rain tour, he was already doing songs for what would be Parade. Like literally, so imagine how Prince felt doing these songs every night that were like 2 albums old by now. And of course, we know how Prince was. When he did a project, when he felt that it was done and over with, he didn't like to look back. He was always moving forward. And so the fact that this tour just had him bogged down with all these old songs, it was just like he felt as an artist kind of stifled. And so I think that's the reason why he kind of did almost like an about face with Around the World in a Day. It's so different. While people were expecting for a Purple Rain 2, which is, he knew that's what Warner Brothers wanted. He knew that's what the Purple Rain fans, and that's what I'm going to call them, what they wanted. But that's not what Prince wanted as an artist. So just like with Dirty Mind was the first album that Prince said was really something that he wanted to do as an artist. Now, I'm not saying that the Prince album, the For You album, weren't songs that he wanted to do, because like he said, all of his songs are his babies. But Prince was an album, and I talked about this in earlier episodes when I talked about the Prince album, where he was trying to prove to Warner Brothers that he could make hits after, For You didn't do so well. For You was, his first album, his first foray into, music producing and all that. So, that he was completely green doing a lot of that stuff that he did on For You, even though For You is a phenomenal album. But Dirty Mind was the first album where he was finally doing the type of music that he wanted to do. And so I think that's the same situation with Around the World in a Day. After the juggernaut that was Purple Rain, as I call the Purple Flood, he was ready to kind of do some music that he wanted to do as an artist. And he also wanted to take his real fans on a journey. And he just hoped that, that they would go on the journey with him, because Purple Rain was wonderful for what it was. But now he was ready to move on to do something that was closer to his heart, something that, that he wanted to do. He didn't like to be stagnant. He didn't like to do the same type of music every album. He liked to change his aesthetic constantly. So Around the World in a Day was that. It was an about face. It was a change, something that Prince felt like he needed to do to be his authentic self. So because of that, I really appreciate this album now much more than I did when I first listened to it. Because when I first listened to Around the World in a Day, I could understand why people were probably disappointed. I could understand why the Warner Brothers executives were disappointed. Because according to Mary Lou Baldo, who was a Warner Brother executive at the time, Prince came in and let them, came to the studio, well, not the studio, to the corporate office, and everybody sat around and listened to it. And he could just tell by the looks on a lot of the executive faces, they were just like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do with this record? Like, of course they love Raspberry Beret, which would be the first single. And other than Raspberry Beret, they really didn't hear anything that they thought would be a hit. So they just kind of was like, okay, we can't put this on radio. What are we supposed to do with this? And Prince didn't really appreciate, that they were disappointed, because he was thrilled with the album. And he did a lot of, collaborations on this album, particularly with David Coleman, who was Lisa Coleman's brother. The Around the World in a Day, the song, it has this Mediterranean feel, because he was playing those type of instruments, and I can't remember the name of them, y'all. I'm sorry. But the Mediterranean, those little chimes and things like that, he actually gifted Prince with this song as a birthday gift. So, and Prince loved it. And so he kind of reworked it a little bit and that eventually became the title track and the title to the album. So he also kind of leaned a little bit more on Wendy and Lisa also during this album. According to them, they were kind of exposing Prince to more, more kind of indie artists or artists like, well, the Beatles aren't indie, but, and they tried to say, at different points that, Prince really liked the Beatles. And then now they're saying that, he didn't like the Beatles. So I don't know what his kind of situation was with the Beatles. I don't know. I don't really think he was a real big fan of their music. But a lot of people say that this sounds like one of their albums, one of the Sgt. Pepper albums. And that may be, and he may have taken some inspiration from the Beatles, but like I said, I don't really think that he was a very big fan of the Fab Four, as they were called. But this album is it does have a very alternative, very psychedelic type of feel to it. And that was purposely done. I mean, it is the complete antithesis of Purple Rain. Like, if you could think of Purple Rain's opposite, like polar opposite, it would be Around the World in a Day. So let's get into it. And like I said, kind of like I did with the Purple Rain review, I'm just going to basically just give my own opinions on the tracks. I'm not really going to talk too much about like what critics thought about it. I might say, oh, they liked it or they didn't like it, or it had mixed reviews. But I will say this much about Around the World in a Day. As you can imagine, yeah, it got mixed reviews by the critics. They were just as confused as everybody. I mean, the public in general, I think, was confused. And I think the only reason why it became a #1 album was because of Purple Rain. Because they were so, anticipating Prince's next album after Purple Rain. I really think that is the only reason why it went #1. But I think a lot of people might have been, just like, okay, what is this, Prince? Okay, this is a little different, and people love Raspberry Beret. I still love Raspberry. It's one of my favorite Prince songs. So he did have some really good songs. And of course, Pop Life, Pop Life and Raspberry Beret, I think, are the two probably strongest songs on the album, but we'll get into that. So let me just go ahead, as always, and give you the lowdown on the statistics. So the album was mostly recorded, and this is of course from the Prince Vault. It was recorded between January and December of 1984, although Raspberry Beret had been first recorded in 1982. And Des Dickerson, in his book, he talks about the fact that he actually heard a really early demoed version of Raspberry Beret during that time period. It was re-recorded in September of 1984. Pop Life was the first new recording for the album, recorded in February of 1984. So now he's doing all this during the Purple Rain tour. Now, because mind you, the Purple Rain tour started in November of 1983. And so it continued on, or no, wait a minute. Is that wrong? That's probably wrong. No, it started in November of 1984. I'm sorry. So yeah, he started this album way before the Purple Rain tour. But the Purple Rain movie kind of slowed him down, but he was still able to, finish it. Okay, so where was I? Around the World in a Day was demoed by David Coleman with no input by Prince in June 1984 and recorded by Prince in August of 1984. America was recorded in July of 1984, which is very fitting because, 4th of July. Raspberry Beret, Tambourine, and Paisley Park in September of 1984. Condition of the Heart and the Ladder followed in October of 1984. Initially tracked during rehearsals for the Purple Rain tour. So I said, once again, these are the Purple Rain tour started in November of 1984. And so before the tour even started, he was pretty much done with Around the World in a Day, even before the tour started. Temptation was recorded in 1984. So that was the only track that he was working on during the tour, marking both the final track on the recorded for the album. So he actually kind of recorded them almost in the order that they would be on the album. 4 of the album's 9 tracks, Paisley Park, Condition of the Heart, Tambourine, and Temptation, are essentially solo performances by Prince, often containing background vocals by Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman, and other occasional musical embellishments by others. America is a full band performance edited down from a longer version later released on the America 12-inch single. And if you haven't heard that, I did put that on the Facebook page back in July. right around when I first started the podcast and started the Facebook page, because the 12-inch single is really nice. It's like the instrumentation, of course, is played all the way out, but it's really good. It's like 20 minutes long, so check it out if you ever get a chance to. Around the World in a Day and A Pop Life, and the latter are also band performances. Okay, so the promotion. The album produced 4 commercially released singles: Raspberry Beret, Paisley Park in Europe, Australia, and Japan only, Pop Life in America, although no single was released prior to the album, as an artistic statement by Prince following the huge commercialism of Purple Rain. So he didn't even have a desire to have any singles. After Purple Rain, he said he wanted this next album to be, very kind of low key in a way. There was no tours to support the album, although a few songs from the album had been previewed on the Purple Rain tour, which ended just 2 weeks prior to the album's release. So the album did, like I said, reach number 1 on the US Billboard Top Pop Album Chart and number 4 on the Billboard Top Black Albums Chart. It was certified gold on July 2nd, 1985, which means it was indicating 2 million copies shipped in the US. It was also certified silver gold by the BPI on April 22nd, 1985, indicating 100,000 copies shipped in the UK. So it did very, very well, as you can imagine. But like I said, it was one of those albums that was just like, okay, what is this, Prince? What are you doing? Where is this going? But he felt like, once again, it was something that he had to do, because Prince, unlike a lot of people, a lot of artists who kind of, really want to cater to, commercial and what's going to make the most money, have the most hit records, that he wasn't about that. That's not what he was about. He really appreciated the music as an art form. That was what was most important to him, to get his music out there. And if people dug it, they dug it. If they didn't, they didn't. And I know that sounds like, okay, but he wanted to make money, and he did. This was a career for him. There's no doubt on that. But he still kind of, he cared about his art, kind of like an artist that makes a painting. They want to be able to express themselves in a way that, if they get their message across to people and people like it, that's great. But it's just one of those things that he just has to get out. Because now, of course, Prince being the musical genius, music was always like in his mind constantly, 24 hours a day. And so that's why he had to get to a studio, even when he was on tour, because he just had to get it out. If he couldn't get it out, he couldn't sleep. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't eat. He couldn't drink water. Like, he really had to get this music out of his head. Like, that's how it was. That's how bad it was. So let's go on and just start reviewing the tracks. So, of course, the first track is the title track, Around the World in a Day. And I don't know, I kind of like how the track starts off with a kind of like almost like a scream, but not like, I was like, okay, so Prince, are you going to do one of your, famous screams? But he ended up not doing that. But I liked, of course, the chimes in it. Like the it has I almost said Midwestern, but Middle Eastern chimes. And of course, he would play with that again during the Symbol album in the 90s. And so he would always kind of, come back to that Middle Eastern type of vibe. And of course, this is what this song has. It has a Middle Eastern vibe. It has a psychedelic vibe. And speaking of psychedelic vibes, the next track, Paisley Park, has that in abundance. I think Paisley Park is probably the most trippy type of track on the album. And I have to be honest, someone made a comment when I posted the video saying that I guess I was too young to understand that, back then they didn't have CGI. Like, I talked about how the video itself was really trippy. But no, I do have an appreciation for it now. But I'm just saying, when I was younger, I didn't. Now, I'm used to, I'm an 80s baby, okay? So I'm used to seeing trippy music videos. Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer, hello? So it's not that I was, not understanding or too young to understand, the psychedelic nature of the video. I was just saying, I just thought it was trippy and a little weird. But that doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I just, was stating an opinion about it. And that's also like the first album, not the first album. Why am I saying album? The first music video that didn't feature Prince or didn't have like anybody in his band. So he just had like these white people that were like, I don't know, they were kind of like what you call like hippies, I guess, and children. And I mean, it was just kind of weird. Come on, y'all know it was kind of weird, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I didn't understand where he was coming from or didn't understand, like, you know, the times or whatever, like they were trying to say in the Facebook post. But anyway, I kind of got off track with that. But I do have a better appreciation for the song now than I did when I first heard it, because when I first heard it, I really didn't care for it. I was just like, oh, okay, Prince. But now I can kind of listen to it and I can kind of, you know, get into it, because it's one of those songs that if you listen to it enough, it'll just stay in your mind. Paisley Park, I don't know the words. But I like how it has a little, like, you know, whimsical kind of vibe. And of course he would do that later, especially on the Graffiti Bridge soundtrack and album. You know, the song Graffiti Bridge. Everybody wants to go to Graffiti Bridge. Da, 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 da. So it has kind of this like whimsical, kind of childlike innocence to it, and I kind of dig it. Now this next song on the album, Condition of the Heart, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This is probably, I don't know. I don't really care for this song, and I'm sorry. I mean, I know a lot of people just like rant and rave about how much they love Condition of the Heart. And I love the piano instrumentation on it. Don't get me wrong. That's probably my, you know, if I like anything about this song, it'll be that. But I don't know. I just don't really care for the lyrics too much. And I kind of felt like it maybe would have been better as an instrumental. And maybe that's what he wanted it to be. But then he thought, you know, kind of second guessed it. I was like, no, let me throw some lyrics on it. That's kind of how it sounds. But I really do feel like it would have sounded better to me. Like I said, this is my opinion. My podcast, my opinion. So don't like tear my head off. But I think that Condition of the Heart would have sounded better as just a instrumental. But I love the idea of him, like, you know, he made that reference to Clara Bow, and you know, I like the vibe, I guess, of the song in a way, but it was just one of those songs that I'm just like, why does everybody just say that they love this song so much? It's like I said, it's just not my favorite, but I mean, like I said, I love the piano. His piano playing is beautiful on it. I really like a lot of his piano ballads, and I think that out of his piano ballads, I would have to say this is probably his weakest to me. And like I said, once again, my opinion, but I do love the instrumentation, and I really felt like he should have just kept it as an instrumental. But moving on, of course, now the 4-track Raspberry Beret. She wore a raspberry beret, the kind you find in a secondhand store. Now, of course, this is now, you know, one of his most well-known songs, and it also has like a little trippy vibe to it. And he makes a reference to a Purple Rain in the fact that he says, you know, when him and this lady are getting it on in the barn, and the horses, you know, wonder who you are. So that was like a scene from Purple Rain, where him and Apollonia were supposed to like be having sex in this barn, and they cut it for whatever reason. And you know, this is probably kind of like, I don't know, now I want to say unrelated. It is related. But so, you know, I'm always on Lipstick Alley and Prince.org and reading all these rumors. So one of the rumors about that scene, why it was cut, like I heard 2 different stories about reason why we're going to go back to the review in just a minute. I'm just going to, you know, gossip for a little bit real quick. So one of the rumors was that they were actually like having sex, and it was like it was too, like, if they would have filmed it and put it in the movie, it would have got like an NC-17 rating. So that's one of the rumors why it was cut. The second rumor, which I really don't believe they were actually having sex. Like I don't really believe that that's true. The second rumor was because the scene filmed so awkwardly. Like you could tell that Prince was feeling what the expressions on his face was like he wasn't comfortable. So I think that's probably closer to the truth than that other rumor. And so those are the two rumors, one of them being, I think, the more truthful one, saying that, Prince just looked a little bit too awkward in the scene, and that's why they had to cut it. But anyway, he makes reference to that in Raspberry Beret. And so I love the song. I love the whole idea of this guy who's like at work, not really doing nothing, and then this hot chick comes in through the outdoor, and he's just like, oh, Prince does these songs where he becomes acted upon by these women, like in Little Red Corvette, she comes and he takes her back to his house. So this girl comes to the store and he takes her out riding by Old Man Johnson's farm. So he gets taken away, or he takes her away this time, and they get it on. And then he talks about he wouldn't change a stroke because baby I'm the most, because he talks about the how awkward it is when your first sexual encounter. People say how it's really awkward, and a lot of times it is, but he said that he wouldn't change anything about it because he had a good time, and he may have not did the best performance, but he said he did what he did, and that was that. And so of course Prince being Prince, he had to add that in there. And so I love Raspberry Beret. It's a song that I come to often when I'm just in the mood to listen to it. And of course his legendary blue cloud suit that he had on in the video. I can't wait to get to Paisley Park because I do know that that is on display there, and just to see that would be great, and of course he had the cloud boots to match. So just classic Prince. He did not like, however, his hair. He said that he thought he had Hulk hair, because what happened, Prince was originally supposed to dye his hair blonde. So if you see on the Around the World in a Day, some of the artwork on the album, you notice that he has on the blue suit, the blue cloud suit, and his hair is yellow looking. Well, originally he was supposed to get it dyed blonde, but when he tried to do it, the dye didn't take, and it ended up like breaking his hair off. And so his stylist at the time, I don't know if it was Earl Jones, which was Jill Jones's uncle, but I think it was. So he had to end up, taking the dye out and cutting his hair. And so for the video, that's the best that they could come up with at the time, because his hair had fell out because of that dye. Because I guess he was allergic to it or something. I'm not sure. But and so he later had said something to, I think, either Lisa or Wendy, and said, that he hated his hair. But I thought his hair looked great in the video. But he said that he thought he had Hulk hair, like like the Hulk. So I thought that was funny. Okay, so moving on. Now, Tambourine. Now, I think that Prince actually played, if I can remember what I read in the Dwayne Tudal book, that he actually played live drums on this. And Tambourine is another one of those songs that's, it's kind of a play on words. You don't know exactly what he's talking about. Like, it seems like he might be talking about masturbation, but then it seems like he might be talking about like his woman's, vagina. So it's just like, he kind of plays off of that with the lyrics. Like, I just want to play, my tambourine all night. And then he'll say, but I want to play in my baby's tambourine. So it's just like, okay, Prince, which one is it? So it's kind of a fun song. And I really like the drums in it. And it's one of those songs that, very memorable, in that it'll get stuck in your head, like tambourine, I mean, he keeps on saying it, tambourine, and then of course he kind of does his little almost like yelling, play my tambourine. So I really like that song. Then the next one, America. I've said this before. I didn't really care for the Free song in 1999. I thought it was probably the weakest song. But now I think I have a better appreciation for it after learning about kind of more about the nature of the song, and how, especially after I learned that he played that song at a lot of the special concerts that he would give for underprivileged youth and things like that. So America is kind of in the same vein. It's a very patriotic song about being able to do what you want to do, how you want to do it, because of the country that we live in. So I think it's kind of a celebration of us as a country, and of course it takes its lyrics from God Bless America. So, but I am kind of curious as to what made him decide to do a song like America, because you never know with Prince, like whatever is going on in his mind at the time. But I guess since he recorded it in July, I guess because July, 4th of July, I guess he was just like, you know what, let me make a patriotic song. I'm proud to be an American. Let me just express that. So I could be totally wrong, but that's just my opinion on how what he was thinking. So moving on, Pop Life. Now Pop Life is probably my favorite track. I love Raspberry Beret, and I especially love the B-side to Raspberry Beret. Oh, I forgot to talk about that. So for those of you who don't know, the B-side to Raspberry Beret is She's Always in My Hair, which is about Jill Jones. And that's one of my favorite B-sides. And speaking of B-sides, I'm going to actually have an episode where I talk about my favorite B-sides. So be out on the lookout for that. But, so what was I talking about? I forgot just a fact. Okay, yeah. So moving on, I'm going to talk about She's Always in My Hair on the episode where I talk about the B-sides. But just know that I did put a link up to She's Always in My Hair because it's a rocker. I think that it would have really did good as an A-side. Like he could have put it on this album and it would have been banging, But Prince being Prince, he decided to make it as a B-side. But anyway, so going back to Pop Life. So Pop Life is probably, I think, the best song on Around the World in a Day. And it's just that it pops. I love the lyrics. I love the vibe of it. And Morris Day seemed to think that the lyric, what you putting in your nose, is that where all your money goes? He said in his book he thought that Prince may have been talking about him. And that's possible. He also thought that Prince may have said, where he says the lyric, where he said, were you mad? Did the postman put your $1 million check in somebody else's box? Because at this time, of course, him and Prince were no longer around each other, and he was no longer in Prince's camp. But he also felt like Prince owed him some money. And Prince was stopping him from getting his money. He actually had to go out to LA. He had moved to LA, and it was Pepe Willie that kind of helped him get some money from Warner Brothers that he felt was owed to him. So I don't know if Prince got wind of that situation that Morris Day was going through. So it's possible, Prince had ears and eyes everywhere, I'm sure. So, but I don't know for sure if Pop Life is, Pop Life could be talking about anybody, it could have been talking about Vanity. It could have been, anybody. But Pop Life is one of those songs that, he's basically saying, look, don't let this life get to you, because this pop life being the way it is, it can influence you, and it can be good. It can be bad. But you really just kind of need to watch, what you do, And like I said, Pop Life was one of the earlier tracks that was released on the album, and it's been remixed and mixed to death. Like it's got so many mixes. Like Sheila E. has a mix that she did, and then it said in 1994, Kirk Johnson remixed it at the Paisley Park Studio. So it's got a Kirk J B-side remix. And rumors have suggested incorrectly, I'm reading this from the Prince Vault, that the booing crowd sampled in the song is from Prince's infamous opening act for the Rolling Stones, but that's actually not where that's from. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was a rumor about that. So, but like I said, Pop Life is just like, I don't know, it's the jam. What more can I say about it? So finally, we got two more songs. The Ladder was another song, one of his more religious songs, that I really, liked when I first heard it, because I love the beginning instrumentation to it, the strings, beautiful. And then just the song itself, it has such a uplifting message, and it really sounds like a gospel song when you listen to it. And this is once again Prince reaching in and talking, going into his spiritual side. And eventually I'm going to have a episode where I'm going to talk about Prince and his religion and how he felt about, making these spiritual songs, because as we know, he would make a spiritual song like The Ladder, this beautiful song talking about going, looking for the ladder, Jacob's ladder, And then the next song is what? The last song, Temptation, about, not just any old temptation, but sexual temptation, so he let it be known that he was, tempted sexually, as, a lot of people are, that's just the nature of sin is, everybody has their own particular sin that they have a hard time dealing with. And I like how in Temptation, he has at the very end, he has this conversation with God, where God tells him, look, you need to learn the difference between love and sex, and Prince was, pretty much trying to tell himself, like, look, I know I need to do better. I need to stop doing what I'm doing or thinking what, because he was probably, like I said, during this time, 1985, 1984 was a very busy time during Prince's love life. If you go back and listen to my episode where I talk about his love life during this time, he was talking to Susanna Melvion, even Susan Muzi. He might still have been in and around during this time. Jill Jones, who else? I mean, he had a lot of women, you guys. So it was like, he probably made that song knowing that, God is probably not pleased with how my love life and my personal life is going, with me juggling all these women. And so he just had a habit of just having that duality, that sex and sin, or sex and love, or sex and spirituality and sexuality. He constantly would do that throughout his album and throughout his discography and throughout his life. But I think that is the last track. So that will conclude my review for Around the World in a Day. Next up, I'm going to take a break from doing album reviews for a little while. I'm going to do the B-side, my favorite B-sides. Talk about my favorite B-side songs the next episode before I move on to Parade. And then after I do Parade, I'm going to have another break before I go on to Sign of the Times. And I'm going to probably do a book review of The Beautiful Ones. So stay tuned for that. Until then, you guys, peace and be wild. And may you live to see the dawn. Bye.